Ladies and gentlemen, it's given me a pleasure to welcome you all for this year's annual general meeting. I would like to start my speech by thanking you all for joining me this morning. Your presence and support are much appreciated, and it is so important to us at this annual meeting to connect with all IFSB members. Okay, last year, our technical committee observed that there is a need to ensure that investors are provided adequate information about the product offered in our capital market, which is ICM. And we, with the International Organization of Securities Commission and Securities Commission Malaysia, held a roundtable on disclosure requirement for Islamic capital market products. Okay, next we proceed with the objective. Okay, the guiding principle on disclosure requirement for Islamic capital market product, which is Sukuk and Islamic Collective Investment Scheme, and also known as ICIS, are intended to meet the following objective. So we have main four objectives, which is to provide a basis for regulatory and supervisory authorities to set rules and guidelines on disclosure requirement for ICM products, especially for Sukuk and Islamic Collective Investment Scheme, which is ICIS, to outline a basis for RSAS to assess the adequacy of the disclosure framework specified by others, and we also to provide a comprehensive disclosure framework for the participant in the ICM. And we also would like to create a greater harmonization of regulation and practice in the ICM, and thus to facilitate cross-border offerings. So, Luqman, how about the other relevant standard? So, for the other relevant standards, our IFSB has developed several standards that have some relevance to disclosure in ICM as follows. IFSB 10, Guiding Principle on Sharia Governance for Institutions Offering Islamic Financial Services. As regards Sharia governance, IFSB 10 covers the relationship between Sharia governance in individual institutions and whatever Sharia governance arrangement may exist for a jurisdiction as a whole. It recognizes that Sharia governance may take several forms, and that jurisdiction have adopted diverse approach to it. The present standard has been prepared within the context and accommodates whatever Sharia governance arrangement consistent with IFSB 10 may apply in institution or jurisdiction. The primary international standard settled for conventional securities market is IOSCO. It has published a number of standards relevant to the matters covered by this standard. Okay, Other than that, implementation of the RAAS are expected to start implementation of the standard in their jurisdiction by 1 July 2018. Such implementation should be undertaken within the applicable Sharia governance, legal and regulatory framework applicable in the jurisdiction. Next, we're gonna proceed with the structure of the standard. So, the principles set out in section 2 of this standard are arranged into 3 sections, which is section 2.1, 2.2 and section 2.3. Okay, in section 2.1, set out the general principles that are applicable to disclosure requirement for Sukuk and ICIS. And in section 2.2, deal with principles specific to Sukuk disclosure, and in section 2.3 states the principle for ICIS disclosures. And each principle is supported by the description of the underlying rationale and by recommend disclosure.
Responsible when you do your work. Information provided in document for the investor should be clear, accurate and not misleading. This is because investors rely on the information to make investment decisions, whether they want to invest or discontinue the investment in an existing product. In order to protect investors, the integrity of their decision making, disclosure related to the product must be clear, accurate, and not misleading. Should not misleading investor by disclosing untrue information or failing to disclose material information. Disclosure must be in a clear and understandable language and presentation. RSA should ensure that the principle is applied to all those who bear regulatory responsibility for the disclosure in question, subject to whatever the legal defense may be available. Luqman, your information is still not sufficient and you use the old time information. Your information is not sufficient and is not a timely information. So I have some work I will do and explain to you. The sufficient information is important because it will disclose useful information to investors to view as material to their decision whether to invest or remain invest. The regulatory framework should ensure that security worth disclosed is regulated. Relevant disclosures are made initially, on an ongoing basis, and in the point of sale material where is the front part of the regulatory framework.
Good morning. class. Please have a seat. For the application of sukuk disclosure, it consists of 4 items. The first one is offering covered by this standard. It defined as jurisdiction have the concept of private and public offering of security. This standard is not intended to affect those definition or how RSA will classify a particular being. For the second one, application to governments, governmental entities, multilateral financial institution. Is defined as RSA applies more limited disclosure requirement to offering by such offerer. It could be choose to apply a subset of the disclosure requirement in this standard to such offering. For the third one, application to cross-border offering. Cross-border offering is typically one where the issuer and the offeree are in different jurisdiction and dominated. For the fourth one is terminology. It's defined as the entity that formally issue a sukuk is often a special purpose vehicle. In such case, the proceeds of the sukuk will typically be received and deployed outside the sukuk structure by the commercial party. Okay, now I will briefly explain about the first principle, which is general disclosure principle applicable to sukuk. So, the first principle is basically some sukuk have certain financial characteristics that are broadly similar to types of existing conventional securities. For the second principle, which is Sharia related disclosure for sukuk, and the definition is the compliance with Sharia is a key part of what sukuk offer.
Sir, how about the third principle of sukuk, which is the structure-related disclosure for sukuk?
Alright, thank you for the question. It's a very good question. So, for your information, the structure-related disclosure for sukuk should be described clearly to allow the investor to understand and assess risk associated.
Thank you, sir, for answer. But I have one more question. I clearly understand about the fourth sukuk principle, but I have a bit confused about the rationale.
About the rationale of fourth principle for sukuk. Sukuk issuer is typically SPV and different from the sukuk obligor. RSA should be careful to require relevant disclosure in sukuk. In some jurisdictions, liability of disclosure may fall on the sukuk issuer. For the fourth one, an offering document that refer to experts and include their reports is required to disclose. Standard address only disclosure requirement, not intended to modify existing arrangement within the jurisdiction.
Thank you, sir. Now I have understand all the fourth principle.
So, for the entities about which disclosure should be made, Appropriate disclosure should be made about all entities materials to an investment decision in the sukuk. In rationale, RSA require relevant disclosure in sukuk to be made about the sukuk issuer, sukuk obligator, and sukuk originator. RSA also should be careful that liability for defective disclosure in sukuk of sukuk issuer, obligator, and also sukuk originator.
Madam, how about the Sharia related disclosure for ICIS?
Thank you for the question. Well, an ICIS should make a sufficient disclosure about its Sharia governance and Sharia compliance to allow an investor sensitive to those issues, and for a type for whom the ICIS is intended to make an informed decision whether to invest or to remain invest.
How about the treatment of stranded asset on income and zakah or other Sharia-related obligatory payment?
Yeah, thank you for the question. For the treatment of standard asset of income, ICIS should explain in its prospectus its process for review of the continuing Sharia compliance of its investment, and for divestment from any investment determined to be not longer compliant. Moreover, explain arrangement made for purification payment to be made in respect of non-Sharia compliant income.
Hey, hurry up! We need to submit the assignment tomorrow. Can you guys find the information about the operations related disclosure for ICIS and specialist ICIS disclosure as well as for the Islamic REITs? Guys, we're going to finish now. We meet after lunch, okay?
Alright. Okay.
Okay. Jegan, can you please find the information about the money market funds?
Money market fund.
I found the information about the private equity or venture capital funds. Okay.
Okay.
The private equity industry encompasses a wide range of firms that raise capital into firms with a diverse range of potential investment strategies. Equity capital is typically raised in a firm structure from a variety of sources, often restricted to institutional or other sophisticated investors.